Welcome to the WoodsTalk podcast extra branch. Yeah, just say gonorrhea for me.
Gonorrhea.
It's fucking perfect. Okay, so we are recording, but I'll pause for like 10 seconds and then do the awkward intro as if we've not been speaking for the last 40 seconds, okay?
Okay.
Duncan Casey, welcome to the WoodsTalk podcast. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, sir?
I am very, very well. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this. I know you've got, even mid-lockdown, a lot of things going on in your life.
I have.
So, yeah, thank you very much.
It's a great pleasure, and thank you for asking me. For some reason, lockdown has made me more busy than I was before. So,
yeah, I think it's definitely something I noticed more so on obviously the Valverde output, that a lot of YouTube channels could have possibly panicked and went, "Ah, shit, we're fucked now." And I know that the typical Valverde setup is yourself and Richard and various other contributors in the same room. And obviously during the COVID pandemic, because some dickhead had a bat fucking hot pot or whatever the fuck it was. Which again, I was speaking to my dad about that. My dad thinks that the fact that someone ate bat soup is because of Christmas markets, you know, that show up in cities in December and they've got all the random food. And my 70-year-old dad's like, it's because of the people eating weird fucking shite all the time that there's fucking coronavirus, or someone's eating an alpaca kebab and they won't shut the fuck up. Do you know what I mean?
Pangolins or something, wasn't that the supposedly, which is some kind of anteater type?
Yeah.
Delio, I think.
It doesn't sound delicious anyway. Whatever it is, it doesn't sound like a bit of cheese and a bit of bread on that would be delicious. You know what I mean? Yeah. No. But as I say, Valverde seemed to be, you know, something I've been listening to for quite a long, well, basically since you started it. And during the COVID thing, you kind of seemed to come out stronger. I said the same to Richard, I feel, with the watch parties and just various other things. You seem to come out of it quite well.
Yeah, we've really, it's been a blessing, actually. I think what it's done is it's given us, it's kind of broken that fourth wall in a way. I think we've been able to kind of connect through the live streams. I mean, it was just something we thought we'd give it a go.
Yeah.
And I think that's really kind of, it's been nice to kind of be opened up in that way. I think the plan is still to go back to what we were doing. We're still recording things over the lovely Zoom.
Yes.
Or Skype. But you know, that aren't live, to the point now actually where I've seen people because we premiere those episodes, and so there's live chat and people are like, are they taking questions? Recorded this days ago, mate. You know, sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's going to be interesting when we go back. I think it's definitely something we're going to try and keep up with and just keep going each week anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think like it's, you know, I've set up my podcast now on Patreon as well during this COVID thing as something to keep me busy before I went mad, basically. And I kind of feel, you know, that prior to that, and obviously when I went on Patreon and I knew that people were going to pay for the podcast, I wanted to start doing stuff over Zoom, so like a video output and stuff. But then, like prior to that, I feel like Patreon's a good indication of who's actually listening and enjoying your stuff, because my podcast is obviously on SoundCloud and Spotify, and they give you statistics, but you can't really gauge how legitimate it is, because how many of those numbers that you're getting are like ghost fake profiles where you're like, as I say, I live in Belfast. A lot of my audience will be people from Belfast and Northern Ireland. And then you look at your stats and you see that your podcast is massive in Sierra Leone, and you're like, that seems a bit fucking shit. Number one in Honduras or something.
I know, we had that because we used to do I had started turning, because you know, obviously where Richard and I came from another channel, and we'd started to do, I'd started to turn the commentary tracks we'd done into podcast form and put them out, and I could see, it gives you that map of kind of where you're most popular, and we had some curious ones in there, so like Lebanon and stuff like that.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah, it's so unusual, because I don't think I'd ever managed to see a Valverde live show in Guatemala or somewhere.
I think that's the old NordVPN or whatever working its magic. Maybe
Yeah.
someone's been stealing Netflix from Sierra Leone because they have something amazing on it there.
I think it's the equivalent of when you get the odd like Instagram follower or Facebook friend request. It's clearly like a webcam girl who's just basically putting a butternut squash up her hole or something like that. Or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like
squash. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I know. And I'm like, oh, she wants to be my friend.
Yeah, it's always
good,
like
good
this
thing too, because she needs to learn English better.
Yeah, there's a bit of a language barrier. But it's so annoying when like they obviously you accept a friend request for the crack usually just to see the services that they're going to offer. Services, I don't know, rim jobs and their Spotify Premium. I don't know, but it's always like this, like an automated thing. Like, hi, how are you? And you're like, I am fine, and they're like, excellent. Where you live? So I was always like in Belfast, and they're like, oh, sounds lovely, and I'm like, you've clearly never been then because Belfast is getting better, but it's still the sort of place people would put heroin instead of BAP. You know what I mean? And or without the BAP, if you're celiac, I don't know what the crack is.
Right.
You know, so it's the equivalent of that. Yeah, so like I am enjoying doing the Patreon, and obviously by the time this episode goes out, Richard's will have been in my Patreon already. So he gave a brief summary of Valverde and your role in that. So I thought we would sort of concentrate on the other thing that you do, which is obviously been affected quite heavily by COVID, but obviously you've been a working actor now for how long?
Just over 10 years. I've been,
And one thing I always wondered, was it always something that you just always did, as well as obviously whatever jobs were paying your bills, and then you took the leap into full time? Or was it always like, I'm not really doing menial jobs, I'm going to give this a stab pretty early, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, so I did it. I did it in various forms, sort of amateur stuff, kind of up to university, and then I went to university and I did a degree in English literature and politics. And I was while I was there, I thought I would probably find a way to do some acting. And in fact, I had a friend. The only other person who went from my school from sixth form into the university went in and did acting. And curiously, one of his housemates was Matt Smith, who's Doctor Who now. But anyway, that's another weird connection. But so he, well, who was Doctor Who? Anyway,
yeah, we don't want to annoy the hardcore geeks listening there. But like, he's not Doctor Who anymore. That's the Valverde coming out in you, because I'm sure you've had people going, well, actually, you know what I mean?
Yeah, God bless him. So he now works in marketing or something. He's quite high up in marketing. So there you go. And I'm an actor. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So I finished uni. I played in a few bands because I'm a musician as well, and that was kind of my creative outlet for 4 or 5 years. And then they kind of we would get them to a certain stage and enough to attract sort of attention from interested parties. And then quite quickly, if you're not tight as a group personality wise, you can quite easily get picked off and things don't work out. So that happened to me twice. And I just thought, I'm fed up putting the work in and the time and the money. And at that point I did have office jobs and stuff, in like telecoms and that kind of.
Oh yeah. I did that. Call centers and stuff. Yeah.
Oh no, not call center. I worked for a company who called Telstra, and if any of your audience is in Australia, they'll know who I'm talking about. But they're basically their national ISP, and but I did a lot of I organised sort of the installation of international telemetry lines, like things like for the Formula One, we'd install them lines because they I think Ferrari, one of the few manufacturers who they would need real time telemetry to go back and forth to Monza from the pit lane, so we would organise that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a lot cooler than a call center. I made a mistake.
It still involved calling people, so I guess there's that. But yeah, so I did that, and I played in the band. Thing kind of wound down, and I think I thought, all right, I'm fed up. I'm gonna just be normal and have a job and work and live. And I got about 4 or 5 months into that and just went, oh, I can't stand this.
Yeah.
And so I tried to find an acting course. I was like, right, it's now or never. I was 25 at the time, I think, and I had a bit of a quarter life crisis. And I just thought, what am I doing? I know what I want to do. I'm faffing around doing this, pretending, you know, basically distracting myself, and I shouldn't be doing that. I should be, this is do or die. So I went and started doing evening classes in Hendon, at a place that turned out to be a bit of a scam. But it wasn't, in terms of the acting lessons, it wasn't, but it's a long story and probably a litigious one if I'm not careful. But basically, the people who ran it or the person who ran it had written a film, and it was based around his supposed exclusive access to the diary of
Anne Frank.
Catherine of Alexander. The last chapter, there was just like going, made it up, not true. No, it was Catherine of Alexandria, who's basically, I think, where the Catherine wheel comes from. Whatever. So we were kind of getting into that, and then it was all going ahead, and I met lots of people through that, and Peter O'Toole was in it, and Joss Ackland and Stephen Burkhoff and all these people. And so it was all it was all happening, and then basically in that space I'd quit my job. I was going to go and help in production, and then hopefully be in it, and it was one of those, and then things kind of didn't work out, put it that way, and people weren't getting paid, and things collapsed. BAFTA stepped in the end and blacklisted it. So, but that was my sort of unceremonious
baptism
into
of fire
the world.
Sort of thing.
And then I just hit the ground, and I was just like, right, I'm just going to get work, and I'm just going to start working. I didn't go to drama school because I just thought I don't want to spend a year trying to get in, 3 years there, you know, in more debt. I'd rather spend 4 years working, so that's what I did.
Yeah, I've been curious about that in the respect, because I'm trying to draw some parallels to what I do, because I've been a stand-up comedian now for about 10 years as well. And I always get asked about stand-up comedy courses. And I'm wondering, like, my feeling on a stand-up comedy course is that it's not really, even if it's a legit, like, class, it's not a Swizz or anything. I just kind of feel that it's not something that you can really learn how to do until you start doing it properly, instead of doing it in a village hall beside a PA with like 6 or 7 other people, and you need to do it. Would it be the same for an acting class, or is it with a legit acting class, can you learn how to act, or is it more so if you want to learn how to get better? Is there still like a natural ability that you have to have?
My advice to most people who sort of have asked me the question of whether or not they should go to drama school, which asking someone who didn't is a bit, I think some people look for the excuse not to go, which is very different. I think it's about, like you say, I think it's about getting whatever experience you can get, and therefore being able to gauge kind of where you're lacking, and then kind of trying to, as objectively as possible, say, look, would drama school help fill those gaps? I mean, I don't think drama school will make a bad actor good, but it can help. It can help prepare you, not professionally, because it doesn't teach you business management necessarily, but it will teach you how to show up professionally as an actor to usually the stage. Is very little training for on-screen acting. But it will teach you, you know, how to be match fit and ready, like on the day. Should you, and it's basically a tick next to your box. So if you're going into, if casting directors are looking at you or whatever, it's a way of saying, yes, this guy or girl is trained to a certain standard. That means that I can have confidence in them to bring them into the room, to show them to a director or a producer, and then they're going to at least be able to get to a certain stage. I think if people were able to look at it more like that, and not, because I think it becomes, especially the top tier ones, and I don't know if it's the same in your world, but if you get into RADA, Lambda, et al., it's seen as this great door opener rather than a great education or a great great training necessarily.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Politics of it.
Yeah, because I always wonder. I mean, I've said to a few people, if they had to do a course in stand-up, and maybe this might be applicable to acting, I'm not quite sure, but it's like, maybe do stand-up or whatever for like a year and get experience, and then maybe do the class, because then you can fine-tune certain aspects. Maybe if you're, you know, learning how to perform better and present yourself and be more, you know, maybe something in that respect. I don't know, would it be the same for acting, or am I just deflating the point?
No, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think, you know, funnily enough, if I were to have gone to drama school, I probably should have gone about 5 years ago, because I do think that having had those years of experience under my belt, it's the same thing with most higher education, I think, is that, you know, if you go in with a much better understanding of yourself and where you're lacking, you're going to go in looking for that to, you know, you're going to go in with the right questions rather than going in with don't know, make me an actor or make me a comedian. But, well, that's a broad canvas. Whereas if you can go in and go, I mean, that it should be what those schools are about as well, which is giving you opportunities to try. But I suppose the opportunities you'll get at a drama school, say, to put on plays and stuff like that, it's not in the environment, it's not in the arena of the real world. You know, it's with to try and please a teacher rather than, you know, an audience of people who can be, you know, capricious and you never know what you're going to get. So
yeah, I've always like, in terms of like, I take it you were probably in school plays back when you were younger, because I was like, was that something that you always ended up getting a decent role in? Because I was like the guy that they made up something for, because there was obviously such a big school, and then they're like doing like the nativity, and I was either walking about with like a tea towel brown taped to my forehead, or at one point, I don't know how this was feasible, but no way, like the teachers kind of feel bad for the lads that don't have much to do. And obviously I was quite like a shy kid and stuff. So at one point, they considered writing that the inn that Mary and Joseph trying to get into unsuccessfully needed a HR manager. So they made me like wear like, like a wee clip-on tie and have a wee clipboard and like sort the road or something. Just stand, just like a twat in the corner.
Yeah, that's quite funny though. That's some creativity right there. The Bethlehem HR department. I did the nativity. I think that was the first thing I ever did on stage, was the nativity when I was a kid, and I was like a fox, and I had to wear like a kind of white leotard, because I guess it was an Arctic fox, white leotard with like a white pin-on tail and ears on my head, and I think I just stood there like gormlessly. And I do remember the sight of an audience, that being my first time I stood in front of people, and that being that kind of, you know, sharp intake of breath and sudden awareness of being the observed. But I didn't. I remember I didn't always get big roles, but I remember doing Oliver in. I guess I would have been about 9 or 10, so I was in primary school still. Yeah, 9, I think, and the older kids always got the lead roles, and I remember seeing that and going, and I was just an urchin in that, and I knew that play like back to front. I had the video, I'd watched it, the old Oliver Reed, "Come here, Bullseye." I said that to my dog sometime, who's not called Bullseye at all, but I go, "Come here, Bullseye, come here, Bullseye," and he doesn't. He just looks at me like, "What?"
I think he's Ray Winston there.
Yeah. Anyway. But yeah, so I remember doing that, and I knew all the words, and I didn't have any lines, but I was literally living this play. Like, even though I was just an urchin walking around in the odd scene, I remember being like, I know this back to front. I could do this better than him. And then the next year, I think it was the next year or the year after, I got the lead role in the play. And then I used to do like a kids amateur dramatics thing, and I got the lead role in the thing for that. And I did tend to get, I did at school as well. Like, I got kind of leads occasionally, or mainly, I suppose. But I don't know. I mean, I suppose yes is the answer to your question.
I suppose it's, as someone who doesn't have a fucking idea what they're talking about, but I suppose just the nature of that business, you know, it's always going to be so crazy in terms of, because like prior to Kenneth, had you done much as a leading man? Do you know what I mean?
On film, no. I had done shorts and student films and that kind of thing. I mean, that came about 6 months into my career. So as I say, I had done the whole acting classes thing, gone on to that Roman epic, and then been unceremoniously ejected from it, and then found myself. So I had spent 6 months just getting my teeth into whatever I could. So student films, and the one good thing that came out of that experience though was that I had a show reel because we'd been able to shoot scenes using their kind of cinema camera. They had a Red One camera and stuff, and a set, so we were able to go and film stuff, which was great. So I came away with decent footage, even though it was of me pretending like I was Robert De Niro in Heat or whatever. But didn't matter, you know, it was just something, and that was enough to get students interested anyway. So so I had done that, and I've had the lead roles in that. But no, Kenneth was the first time I played the lead in a film, like a feature-length film.
Yeah, because for anybody listeners that mightn't have seen it, you know, that's a big jump to go from, you know, maybe having to be in a leading film, and obviously the whole thing revolves around you. I mean, was that a big jump? Were you ready for it? Were you apprehensive, or was it a bit of both? I mean, like a good nervous?
No, I mean, no, I mean, there was. I mean, I don't know if it was the arrogance of youth or whatever. I would have been 26, I suppose, when I did that. I went into that excited at the opportunity, and I had really what I had thought about was the fact that I actually think playing lead roles that I've tended to, in terms of my, in terms of critical reception, I've tended to do better as a leading man. And I think that, I don't know if that's because I just have a vacant expression on my face most of the time, but it does, being a lead, being the cipher for the audience, you have to be acutely aware of, it is actually a blessing in a way that you are, you're able to play every scene reactively, because generally speaking, the events of said film are sort of supposed to be happening to you. So you're the one going to, it's all the other characters who are affecting the plot, because that's what their function is. Whereas your function is to go through it and be the observed and be the one that the audience kind of lives through in the moment. So it's, I don't know. I mean, I mean, yes, you do all the work as the character and you understand the character, and you've also got a much clearer A to B story. Whereas, any other ancillary character is not going to be on screen all the time. So they're away. So they're not accounted for sometimes. And sometimes, so you have to kind of, there's a lot more work you have to do for that. So, I mean, the work of being the lead is more because you're there every day, but it's actually, in terms of I find it easier to slip into sometimes, not always, but I find it generally easier to do performatively.
It's kind of cool. I mean, I don't know if it's like, do you think now looking back that it came at the right time to make that jump to sort of doing the leading man role in a film? Because I know that I've seen this a million times from particularly aspiring comedians, where they maybe do 3 or 4 gigs around the time they start, and then they go okay, and then they're like, I could open for Kevin Bridges in there, in an arena now, and you're like, no, you can't. You're probably good, but no, the people that chase stuff a bit too early in their career, where they're like, I want to be on Live at the Apollo, and I want a Netflix special, and you're like, you're only 18 months into this. You have to appreciate that there's a learning curve. You know what I mean? Would it be the same in acting, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends person to person and project to project. I suppose the difference, it is slightly similar, but I think the difference generally is that you've also got that added sort of extra variant or axis of you don't know what project you're going to get into. So, yeah, I mean, definitely. I think it's hard to say. I mean, Kenneth is a funny one, because I did that, 2010, June, July 2010, so 10 years ago. And it then, one lesson I really took away from it, aside from, the doing of the job and everything, but the lesson I took away from it was don't, because I went in going, lead role, mate. This is it. Lead role. Everyone's going to see that. Everyone's going to see that. Turn it into Michael Caine. But everyone's going to see that, and then they're gonna go, right, for my next film, the main man and millions of dollars. And it's like, no, that's not. And it took them 2 years, I think, to finish it, to get a final edit together, and then start applying to festivals. So it wasn't until 2013. So it was a 3-year wait. And in that time, I'm going, Kenneth, it's the answer to all my prayers. I mean, I was working, but I mean, I kind of went through and it taught me not, and I still make the mistake now, but when you get an exciting project and you do it, and then you're that gap between whenever it's going to be released or announced, even, because some things you're like, even if they're just going to announce it, it's going to be great for me, and so it taught me that as a valuable lesson. Don't do the job, walk away, focus on the next thing, and don't. So I think, I'm sure the same is true of stand-up comedy as well. It's like, if you make those increments, you need to understand that it's usually 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then wait. You know what I mean? And then it's okay. Everything comes in leaps, and so it's,
absolutely. Because
patient.
I'm kind of sort of glad of the fact that it fluctuates so much, and I kind of, because I still have a day job, which I used to feel shitty about, because I used to hear people say that in terms of any sort of showbiz role, whether it's acting or musician, whatever, that you can't work the day job and do it simultaneously. You have to take the leap, which it used to really get to me, where I was like, am I not destined enough to maybe do this because I haven't made the leap, even though I've been in, I'm married and stuff now, and I have bills to pay, so I can't really say, by the way, Lisa, you're paying bills from now on, because I want to go do open mics in Grimsby, you know what I mean? But I kind of feel that any sort of good stuff I've been lucky enough to do, I kind of like the fact that maybe a day or two later, if not the next morning, I'm back in the office at 8 o'clock, back to normality. You know, so maybe it keeps the ego at check. Because I did a place here in Belfast, did the Ulster Hall with a few of my friends, booked it when we were feeling adventurous. It's 1,000 people, and I was like, this could go very, very badly. It's fucking sold out, right? Crazy. It was one of the best nights ever. That was on a Friday night, and I was in work then on the Monday morning, and like it was back to normality. And like I played to 1,000 people on Friday, so I kind of like the fact that I can't get an ego now, because at the end of the day, I'm still back in a fucking office beside a water cooler within a day. You know what I mean?
Well, and also it avoids. I made that mistake for a number of years. I thought that because once I started to financially do okay from acting, which was it was mainly off the back of booking a bunch of adverts, and one quite big one. And so it was like I thought, yeah, right, good. I'm just a full-time actor now. I can afford to live for a year or whatever without earning anything. And then I proceeded to pretty much. And it's like, well, that. And then where are you? And I got for a good number of years, including during which time I met my now wife. I had it in my head that if I took a job doing anything else, that's like I'm a failure. I'm not an actor anymore, am I?
Yeah.
And people will sneer at me, and I started to worry what people thought. And then actually, it's a horrible downward spiral. And then you get financially tight, and then things aren't working out, and then you blame yourself. And I was just like, I want to be I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good father. We're about
100%.
to have a baby, and it's like, and that stuff will really start to dent you and wear you down and grind you into the ground until you'll give up. And that's not what you want. So I always say to people, no, find something you can do that enables you to keep going and keeps you financially healthy, because this is not going to work. I mean, there's so many, actors, God, I'm sure it's the same with your profession. It's like, they come in and they go, no, I'm going to be the chosen one. And then they get little bits of evidence to show them that might be the case. Like they might book a good job, or they might, and it might go really well, but it's like, it doesn't mean that the next thing along the line is stardom. It's no, you need to be, and you need to not be desperate when you're going in to meet with people as well. And that's something that I think is really important. Like for me, like whether I get a job or not anymore, I know I can earn money elsewhere, as I do writing and stuff on the side, and I've been blessed with that recently. It's doing really well. So I think that's really important, because I don't want to walk into an audition and you don't want to walk onto stage, and especially if there's been a big gap like there has for a lot of us now. Yeah. And you're like, there's too much writing on this. There's too much writing on it, because it will show. People can sniff.
Absolutely. Because I think like obviously the pressure these days is so high, and I say it got to me for years. That it wasn't, because you almost feel like you're not devoting yourself to the art, But then I was speaking to a comedian. I was on like a panel show here in Northern Ireland a couple of years ago. This panel show's been going for a while, and I was a guest on I did the radio show, and then when I did it for TV, one of the panelists, who's been a well-known comedian here since I was a young child. I remember watching that show when I was like 10, so it was weird when I went on it. But he was saying, and I'm sure there's been no issue for at least 15 years, tours and blah, blah, blah. And he was saying that when he started earning really decent money from comedy, he bought like a space in Belfast and opened an off license. And like it doesn't advertise it as his, but he works in it. So he sells out like 1,000-seater venues, and he was like, but I work in the off license, not just very sort of low production value off license, just sit there and read the paper. And I was like, but you don't need to, because he's quote unquote made it. And he was like, but I need something to do. He says, I would go mad if I was just standing around all day waiting to go to a theater that night. So that changed a lot for me, where I was like, well, at least I'm busy and preoccupied, because to be honest, what would I do during the day if I didn't have this job and I was waiting to maybe go do a gig that night? I could maybe churn out a podcast or two, but what's that, 2 hours?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the devil makes work for idle hands, right? I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think, I do understand why, because the most people's touch point with the creative industries, comedy, I'm sure, and certainly in acting, you know, it's like, it's the Hollywood, it's the top 1.1% or whatever, you know, it's like The Rock and his philosophy, and there's some sort of stupid 10-minute inspirational video with slow motion clips of him working out and then going like, you got to keep your back against the wall, and like, oh, that's my philosophy, oh my, and it's like, right, but you know, the reality is that you know, we don't all have private that's fine when you get to that level, and I have every like tons of admiration for that man, but you know, you're not there yet. And I think the big problem is that people see where they are and think they have to jump that gap, that chasm in one hit.
Yeah,
you know, it's like every stone they throw, be it an audition or a, you know, or doing a stand up or whatever it is, like that is what's riding on that throw, or that cast of the dice, or whatever allegory you want to assign to it, has to get you there. And you're not trying to do that. You should be trying to do the next step and the next step and the next step. And you're not going to be The Rock because he's The Rock.
Yeah.
So don't be him. Be you, and just keep, you know, and learn to love the journey. Because I think so many, again, that's that thing of end goal mentality all the time.
Yeah.
And you're just going to be disappointed, and you're going to quit 10, 15 years in having nothing, you know, a giant gap on your CV that just says actor or comedian or whatever. And some twat in an office who wants to tear you down a peg or two for trying is going to sniff at you, and then you're going to feel like shite for the rest of your life.
Exactly. There's something about that you brought up there that does get on my wick a lot, and I see it from people like Joe Rogan and stuff, where he's like, you know, get a sensory deprivation tank, and they're like, okay, I'll go to Argos. Well, for fuck's sake, like for my 1-bedroom flat in Belfast, you know what I mean? As if like, just get yourself this ridiculous oven, you know what I mean, that costs about 10 grand so you can cook elk. And you're like, again, I live in Northern Ireland, I'm not finding no fucking elk, you know, apart from maybe a Christmas market, I don't know.
Amongst the pangolins you've got to search, but
yeah. I think
I know,
sorry,
no, I know. I used to have the same problem with like Jamie Oliver. Like people would buy, because I'm quite into my cooking and my food, and people would buy me, like Jamie Oliver cookbook. Yeah, and it'd be like, the front of it's like good things to have in your larder, and it's like Eye of Newt, you know, get whatever shiitake mushrooms or whatever, and I'm like, you mean go to Waitrose and just clear them out?
Yeah,
like,
just get an overdraft and go to Waitrose.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like I think I'm quite into cooking as well, more so during the lockdown. But I feel like if you're going to look at someone's recipe, you know, it shouldn't sound like a fucking potion in Harry Potter. It should be stuff that's accessible. But when they go like, well, if you want to do this, you have to deep fry an eagle's taint and then get the tears of a, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, you know what really does my head? I don't know if you found this over the lockdown. I sort of sat down and I was like, well, I'm going to start cooking more, and here's just some of the recipes I'd like to try. And then obviously I would do a bit of internet research. Why can't they just, on these websites, just have the fucking recipe? Why does there need to be the life story about how they get it? We're like, you say like, I want to make a tiramisu, and you go on this fucking bullshit website, some dickhead's blog, and they're like, well, when I was getting rimmed in the Philippines, I came, no, you're like, fuck up. You know, it's just,
I'll tell you why they do that. It's firstly, you might notice that as you're scrolling down that, there are adverts interspersed throughout. So there's that. Second is SEO. So it's designed to, like, the search engine optimization, it's all designed around finding websites that not only answer the search query you may have put in, but also, and it just creates more attractive, like it attracts more search algorithms. That's why people write you know, their backstory on how they discovered alpaca juice in the Himalayas before, you know, and that's how tiramisu came into their life. You know, it's like, I know it doesn't matter, but you just got to go through it and you go, where are the bullet points? Wait till I see bullet points and then I'll start reading, you know. And it's like, but BBC Good Food is good for that, because they're not particularly fussed, and it literally goes ingredients, yes, method, yes, done, and it's so easy. So
so I feel like it's definitely, if you're going to be cooking, you know, just those things really just annoy me, where you're like, I can't get that, you know. Or even if they say, if you can't get, you know, the fallopian tubes of a giraffe, just get cheese. And
I know,
just get a living.
I always kind of, my love of cooking kind of firstly came from cooking with my dad, but basic stuff. But he sort of taught me survivals, so bolognese and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And then Keith Floyd. Keith Floyd was my boy. I just, for some reason, when I was younger, which is not, you would never think like a young kid of about 12, 13 is going to watch Keith Floyd. Do you remember Keith Floyd? Keith Floyd he's on, so they often, he's the one who drinks a lot and he's very gregarious. You know, very,
I know exactly who you're on about. Yeah.
Right, come here, look down. And he's always directing everything. He's like, look down here, Dennis. Right, I'm putting that in there. And he's just, and I think I've probably made 2 of the things he's ever talked about, but it's not the point. The point was he would travel there, so he would literally be stood in the. I mean, he was cooking things on like junks going up and down, like in Hong Kong, or like he'd be on the Saigon River cooking a jungle curry or whatever. But that wasn't the point. The point was this is why these ingredients are important to this local area. This is why they're really, really nice. And if you can't get galangal, then you can get ginger. That's not a problem. But here's the principle on how to cook this sort of style of food. And so it just encouraged me to get really adventurous and not be scared of trying, and so that's where that came from.
I think I had a sort of baptism of fire in terms of cooking. Like, it was always something I was interested in, but just the lazy streak inherent within me, just like the only time I really had to get stuck on it was like as a student, where you kind of had to learn how to cook because you couldn't get takeaways every night because obviously you're on a budget. And then I thought to myself, I could probably do a decent job of making something. And what really hit home for me was, we hear this for being an idiot. My roommate at the time, Sean, got the, do you remember pasta and sauce? Do you remember that shit?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He gets that. And apparently he's supposed to add a bit of water and a bit of milk and blah, 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 blah. He emptied the pasta and sauce directly into the fucking kettle and then poured half a pint of milk into it and then just boiled it. And man, the smell was there for about 3 weeks. I was like, we're going to lose our fucking deposit because of you arsehole. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, I can do better than that, for sure.
Well, that's one of those, like, why has no one thought of this before? I'm a genius. It's like Homer Simpson logic. Like, I'm a genius. You're like pouring it into a kettle, and it's just like, but,
it's like like a life hack that you've seen during the lockdown. Everybody seems. And they're just like, here's how to, like the worst thing I've seen in Belfast now that the lockdown's kind of lifted. People are obviously being told to maybe wear face masks if you want that sort of thing. I seen a guy yesterday on like a mobility scooter, and basically he just had like wire, and he had like tied like a bit of a gazebo around the mobility scooter to sort of protect himself. So he's just like down there with half a gazebo, just sellotaped to his fucking scooter. And you're like, that's a bit much, to be honest. Yeah.
It's not like sort of coverings in general aren't what we're after. It's sorry.
It's just like 2 sandwich bags and it's just on his hands. But one thing I did, as I say, I don't really research too much ahead of these, but I wanted to ask, being in that industry, what was it like when Game of Thrones was popular? Because obviously living in Belfast, it went mad and everybody was trying to get on it, even people who weren't actors, and even in terms of extras. I mean, from your end, from your agency or however it works, was it just the dominant thing that you had to try and get involved in, or was it something that you were like, I don't even give a shit on it? Because I think it's an overrated show, to be honest, but it dominated. Like, even like I know some people, and they were like, oh, like comedians are like, oh, I'm going to try and get a speaking role and stuff. And was it the same your end, or did no one give a shit?
Well, Game of Thrones, along with football and male grooming, I suppose, is on the list of derision for Richard and I at Valverde. So I've met the casting director for Game of Thrones, Nina Gold. I have friends who've been on it as actors, and crew. I know crew who've crewed on it. I watched the first season, so I think someone gave me a box set, or I think my mum gave me a box, which is weird now that I think about it, given the softcore porn nature of that program.
That's a weird present to get from your mum, definitely.
Yeah.
Here's a human centipede.
Yes, yeah. You'll love this. You like bugs. Yeah, but my favorite part of the human centipede is the angry German, slightly narcissistic or oh, sorry, not narcissistic doctor. It's just when he goes, Scheiße, and like, walks out, storms out the room. That just makes me giggle. So I watched the first season, and it was a slog to get through. I thought I did it while I was doing the ironing, and I just thought, I don't like this. It's too, for me, it was just sort of way too obviously salacious, and it just wasn't my bag. Let's put it that way. Just in the same way as like I can appreciate the Lord of the Rings and that kind of thing, but you know, Richard and I both have this thing of like that sort of mystical, you know, goblins and quickly to the minds of thing, and you know, language that's all flowery and made up, but we just kind of go. And then, you know, as Richard quite rightly pointed out in a rant he went on about Game of Thrones a little while ago, it's like the people who come to you and try and justify their love of it when really what they want to look at is tits.
Yeah.
Is they go like, oh, no, it's really good actually because it's kind of like about politics and stuff. And it's like, well, why don't you watch politics then? Why aren't you into politics? Like, I don't understand if that's a good thing. There are real politics you could get involved in. So anyway, it's it's not my thing. If I'd been offered a chance, obviously, to get on it, then I would have taken it. But it wasn't. It just wasn't something that was on my radar. I think in terms of my casting type, the people I know who were on it will have a very, very striking, distinctive look. Yeah, I think they're fantastic actors as well. Don't get me wrong, but I think that helped them kind of get those roles. Whereas if you're not whatever his name is, Kit Harington or Michael Boone, then
I think I have a mate who auditioned. He was scouted to play a rapist.
Lovely.
And he didn't get it. And I don't know. I'm just going, you know, usually when you don't get a role, I assume there's a bit of a sting. Maybe not so much where you're like, you know, and fair play, he is a character actor, so like he has experience, but he didn't get it. And I was like, oh, well, that's not the worst thing in the world to be not believable as a rapist.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, quite. So you really feel it, Steve. I didn't get that you really want to rape.
Yeah, the lack of consent didn't really come through in your facial features.
Yeah, I mean, there are things. I mean, I've been up for things before, and I've kind of gone, I'm not right for this. But this is because quite often what will happen though, as well, is you'll get a casting director who will like you, and they will deliberately see you for something that you're not right for because there's a chance, you know, because invariably there are rounds to go through, so it won't just be one audition. You know, it'll be an audition and then a callback, and then you know, and probably another callback, and more executives will be in the room at that point. And the same thing with adverts as well. So typically if you get into a first round of casting and you know you're probably not right for it, it's usually a casting director kind of testing the water with you, and because it's just them in the room, so they don't have to pass your tape on or anything. They can kind of just
because I've always wondered, I mean, like technically like an audition for a role, it feels like one of the few job interviews you can have where you could absolutely knock it out of the park and still get nothing from it. Like it's very like, you could do a brilliant audition, but they're like, oh, well, maybe slightly too tall or not tall enough, or I don't like his eyes, or he's got one nostril that doesn't seem to, you know what I mean? It seems to be sometimes you could smash it and leave there feeling great and then lose out for the most trivial reason. I mean, how do you deal with that? Because I've done a few auditions for weird things, and respectfully, it was painful, you know, between the audition itself, the wait. Like it was very tough. Like, again, it's not my usual thing, so maybe I just don't have enough experience. But like, how do you deal with auditioning? Because it seems pretty soul destroying. I mean, do you ever get used to it, or do you just adapt? Or
I think you need to find what works for you. That's not a cop out answer. I mean, I have found it. I've found it frustrating more than I mean, there have been times when I found it very frustrating because it's a skill in and of itself. It comes with its own set of rules that aren't the same from one casting director to another. You know, I don't have to name it. I went up for an ad last year, for example, that was for a big car company, lots of money riding on it. And the casting director and her assistants kept fussing. And bear in mind, they wouldn't release the script, so we had to go in and learn it whilst we were sat waiting to go in. So there was 2 scenes we had to just learn in the room, you know, which is, there was no prior warning. So I was like quickly trying to cram my lines. I was doing little reads with other actors, but she kept coming and going, sit over there. No, sit over there. And did you brush your hair? And have you cleaned your teeth? You know, it's just all this sort of like rules in your face. Now when you go in, turn around 3 times and switch the light on and off. You know, it was just like, okay, Like, calm down. This is not what you should be. You shouldn't put an actor in that mindset when they're supposed to go in and deliver a performance for you, lest we forget. So I kind of feel that I learned to tune all that out. So in that instance, I just went, and then just carried on with what I was doing. Because I knew that as soon as I got in the room, all that goes out the window. You've got a director and a producer who just want to see someone at ease, someone giving a performance, you know, and I learned, it is the Bryan Cranston advice, but it's that thing of, you know, much in the same way as I was talking about projects, when you get the job, is to not pin your hopes on it working out and to not assume anything about it, but to just do the job, enjoy the job for what it is, and then walk away. It's the same thing with auditioning. It's like, this is, firstly, if you've asked to audition for something, it means you're good enough to get it, because they honestly, they get thousands of submissions for any one role. If you're asked to turn up, that's because they genuinely think you've got a very good chance of getting it, like a 1 in 10 or 1 in 5 or whatever chance of getting it. So, and that's getting more, especially since COVID's come in. We're self-taping a lot from home, and they're narrowing it down even more. They're not calling as many people in to do things. So it's you know, it's you and 4 other people maybe. So it's just knowing that and going, great, all I'm going to do is walk in. I've got my interpretation of this. I'm going to have some fun. I get to do a little performance for a few minutes. That's it. Walk away. It's so hard to do, because I know, like, especially when something's like massive and there's a lot riding on it. I mean, I had this recently. I got asked to self-tape by a casting director in LA for a TV show that's shooting in Spain and Italy, and it's got Denise Richards in it. You remember her? And, and Jane Seymour, so 2 Bond girls.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like I want to do that, you know, and so I did that, and then lockdown happened. So I was like, well, I guess I'm fine, I guess, when that's not happening. And in fact, my agent has another client who's booked on it and had to stand down. But and then a few weeks later, they asked me to audition for a different role in it, and I was like, this is a good sign. But again, I don't know if anything's going to come of it. It's not, but you know, you have to kind of really get used to the idea that an audition is like a little job in itself. You're getting asked to go and do a job, essentially.
Yeah.
And then whether you get the job or not off the back of it is kind of like, it's not irrelevant, but it's like, I think people can get it into their heads far too much as well, that like the etiquette and the rules around casting, that can trip you up as well.
Yeah.
So it's hard, but
yeah, I was always wondering too, and again, not to sound like an old man, but what happens if you're auditioning for something that you almost need to get from a financial point of view, where you're like, the rent won't be paid if I don't get this? I mean, is it hard to forget about that, or does that play a part?
Well, I sort of go back to what I said before, which is don't allow yourself to get into that position and find ways to make money. But apart from that, you know, there's been times when I've been in that position and got the job and not got the job, you know. So it's hard, and you don't want that desperation in your eyes when you're in the room and there's too much riding on it, because that's what you'll think about. Your energy or your subconscious or wherever is going to be on that fact. It's not going to be on, I'm going to have fun. This is going to be fun, you know. So, but then, like I say, there's always exceptions to that rule, because I have been desperate at times and I've gotten the job. It's been just at the right time. So I think it's best to not be, for your own sanity, though. Yeah,
I just can't stop thinking now about all the things you've said thus far, and the people that are in the human centipede. that whole process, and then obviously, you know, when you got Kenneth, you had a bit of a swagger. Let's say when you first got it, I wonder if they had the same, where they're like telling their parents, "I'm in this thing," and then you know, when you think you've made it, and then you're actually filming it, and you're just on your knees in front of someone's like an arsehole prop or whatever it is. I don't know if it's paper mache arsehole, whatever it is. Or like, you feel like, you know, the bit in Shawshank where he pulls the poster away and just sees the big hole and he's like, do you know what I mean? Like, I just wonder, do they invite their parents to the premiere and be like, look at what I'm doing here, look at how well I kneel, and do you know what I mean? I can't stop thinking about that, man.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I've been fortunate enough not to really have anything too embarrassing. I did an episode of Call the Midwife years ago that involved a gay kiss, and I think my dad, bless him, found it hard to watch, but only because he's old school, I guess, or what, I don't know. But obviously I was just like, yeah, but I'm on the telly and in a really good thing, and I wasn't playing a gay guy, but anyway,
Yeah.
never mind. But yeah, there's been moments like that, and there's been times where like I did a sex scene in a thing years ago, and I didn't want, I don't really want people to see that. But I don't tend to watch my stuff either. Like I'll go to, if there's a premiere, generally I'll go to it. Although I missed out. I did a film called Welcome to Curiosity years ago, and then the director got in a spot of bother, put it that way, and then spent some time at Her Majesty's pleasure, and then came out, and nothing to do with the film or anything like that, but his past life caught up with him, put it that way.
Yeah.
He's
I think
doing what he does.
there's definitely a parallel.
Sorry,
I think. You just think there's a parallel. You were saying about your dad there that, I grew up, I'm not from Belfast, but I grew up like a small town near it. And then when you say that you're starting to do stand-up and all, did you find that people from an outside perspective in terms of acting or being a musician assume that it's so easy? Because the amount of times that someone has watched like Live at the Apollo or something, I'm like, you should get on that, and you're like, all right, didn't think of that, I'll do it tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, well, you should have been in Dunkirk, and you're like, well, it doesn't quite fucking work like that, where you're like, do you know what I mean? Like that still does my head in, to be honest. They're like, you should be doing that. You're like, oh, cool.
Yeah, it's the constant resetting of other people's expectations is like a job in and of itself. But I've tried to stop caring, because it's always the same question. It's like, oh yeah, it's the guy, it's the fast show guy in the pub, right? It's the thanks, are you? Gay, are you? But it's always the same series of questions like, oh, what would I have seen you in? And it's like, well, I don't know what you've seen. Why don't you start listing everything you've seen ever, and I'll say whether or not I was in it. So what? Or you'll say, yeah. Well, I've been in EastEnders. I've had a recurring role in EastEnders. Don't watch that. Like, well, right. Emmerdale, don't watch soaps. Yeah. No, I don't like soaps. It's like, hang on, is this a game of what you like, and I'll only measure up if I was in what you like, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, and if I was, you'd know where I was anyway, wouldn't you? So what are you talking about? And I get really, I just go, look me up, Google me, shut up. Yeah. And then it's, I suppose that's really hard to get into, isn't it?
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff. I mean, I also get told that I should audition for James Bond, Doctor Who, name and famous thing. Why aren't you getting seen for that? And it's like, and I've learned though as well that, like, because my reaction to that was used to be like, stop calling me a failure. I'm not a failure just because I'm not James Bond or whatever. It's like, no, you're taking that. You're taking them, what they're saying, to mean that. And maybe they do, maybe they don't, but actually I can react to that differently and go, thanks, but doesn't really work like that. Appreciate that, but
yeah,
that's not, because I mean, everyone's going to have an opinion, and unfortunately you and I are both in a line of work that is public facing in that way. So everyone does have an opinion.
Oh, but when you're like at a family party and then you meet someone new and they're like, oh, what are you doing? You're like, oh, I'm a comedian. They're like, oh, tell us a joke, mate. And just like, and I don't know if you get the same, but they're like, no, give us a monologue where you have to do Jim Gordon's closing speech at the end of The Dark Knight or something like that at the middle of the party. You're like, I'm not gonna, like, they're like, tell us a wee joke. And you're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I have an internet presence to do that. And they're like, I watched a clip of you on YouTube there when I was in having a shit, and I didn't think it was that good. And you're like, well, that's okay. And it's,
thanks for sharing. Mate.
Yeah, fine.
I do get. It's usually do a voice or do an impression. Like I went to pick my dad up from having his van serviced or whatever the other day, and I walk in and the receptionist's already talking about me before I've said, oh, you're famous or whatever. I'm like, not really. And then she was like, your dad says you can do a good Arnold Schwarzenegger. Go on, do it. And I just went, no. I'm not performing like, I don't call you round to my house and go on then, answer my phone and book an appointment, do I? Like, I'm not, like, we don't, I'm off now, I'm not on, so don't, and also I get paid for that. So if you hand me over some money, we'll service my car and I'll do you a joke or whatever. It's like, shut up. Like, what? Yeah. I know, it's because I think there's that assumption that because it's a job that in theory everyone wants to do, although that's not really true, that if you are that thing, if you are a comedian or an actor, you must just be overjoyed at every moment to get an opportunity to perform with, or it's just something you just switch on, and it's like, it doesn't work like that. Yeah,
because I know that when we agreed to do this, there was, I'll be honest, there was a 2-minute period where I was like, I might try and try and get you to do some impressions, which I'm not going to do now. But I admit I had the 2 minutes dickhead period where I was like, oh, it's going to do this. But I do want to ask you about them just because it's something I've always been fascinated with, even pre-stand-up, because, I remember seeing videos of Jim Carrey, early Jim Carrey. I don't think he was doing films, but he was doing stand-up type stuff, and he was doing impressions, and he was able to do the whole person, the person's face and everything. I mean, was impressions something that you just naturally fell into, or is it something that you always appreciated from a young age and wanted to kind of emulate as well?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess I always admired people who could do accurate impressions. That always, the idea that you could sort of channel a person. And it sort of feeds into acting as well. I mean, I tend to think even when I'm playing someone that people don't know, I'm usually, voice actors say this a lot as well, but I mean, I'm usually sort of especially if it's a voice, I'm usually doing an impression of someone or something. It won't necessarily be a famous person, but I will have found it somewhere. I mean, the Simpsons guys always talk about that. Like Homer is Walter Matthau, basically just a bad impression. Billy West talk about it with Zoidberg is a combination of what was it? It's the uncle from Anne Frank. Let's go back to that. Yeah, there's a film version of the Anne Frank or something, and there was a scene where the uncle's eating all the food, and they find him in the morning, and he just looks down and goes, "I stole from the children," and then he sort of took that and added the kind of, because he's got mandibles or whatever on the front of his face, and it's sort of like and he kind of just combined that, and that's why Zoidberg is like this, and all that stuff. And so yeah, I mean, I think, and isn't Chief Wiggum Al Pacino? No, Mo the bartender is early Al Pacino but gravelier. So it's the sort of Serpico, I shoot you in the back, like that guy, but gravelier. So he's Mo the bartender. He's sort of like that,
Yeah.
So I love that. And then I just always kind of, I don't know, I've always enjoyed just doing voices. It's fun.
Yeah. Is there I've sort of watched a few people who are on Saturday Night Live at the minute talking about how they do impressions, and they always feel like there's a trigger word or a certain phrase that celebrity says, and then they just build around that. Do you find the same, where it was one mannerism or one phrase that someone said, and then you could just build the impression around it? Do you think?
Sometimes, yeah. There's been some people who it's taken me a long time to kind of figure out, and quite often, I'll be honest, I plagiarize other people's impression. If I see someone else do a really good impression and I realize what they've picked up on, I'll go, yeah, and I'll pick up on that. Jeff Goldblum was one that I struggled with for a long time, and probably still am. But I saw someone do an impression of him, and it's more the older, the modern day Jeff Goldblum than the other. But it's a dithery. I like ditheriness. I've noticed that, Ken Bruce, who's a radio DJ. Did you get Radio 2 there?
Yeah.
Listen to Radio 2?
Yeah.
So it's that sort of, it's that kind of all over the BBC Radio 2. It's all that kind of, and Jeff Goldblum was the same thing. It's you're really, and so and once that kind of just gave me license to do that, I was like, oh, that's what that is.
Yeah.
So, but some people, who was it? I was thinking the other day. Who no one Bill Nye. No one really does Bill Nye, but he's got such a great,
True, yeah, he's got quite a distinctive voice, yeah.
It's sort of because he was doing he was narrating a thing about railways on BBC whatever the other day, and I was like, that's Bill Nye.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there and then doing it with my wife, and I was going Bill Nye, doing Bill Nye, and she was like, what are you talking about? And I had to explain who he was, and then she went, oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's the sort of Love Actually kind of, turns out person I love is you. Sort of,
he's never in a rush, Bill Nye.
No, he's never in a rush.
Yeah,
and he's brilliant, and I love Bill Nye. I think he's fantastic, and really great. He's someone who didn't go to drama school, actually.
Yeah,
interesting. But
because I know that, again, I won't stray too much on the impressions too much, but the reason I wanted to talk about it is, and tell me if I'm wrong in terms of the title of the film, but there is a film where you play someone from Ireland, the Wicked Witches.
Yeah.
But it's obviously the other Ireland. Let's not get into it.
Yes.
Especially today, with the 12th of July was yesterday and stuff, which I don't give a shit about, by the way. It's not a sensitive subject, but the good Ireland. You played someone from the non-petrol bomb Ireland. Do you know what I mean?
Sunday, bloody Sunday.
Yeah.
Alan Partridge gets you out of so much stuff, because if you do that as Alan Partridge voice, it's kind of, oh, okay, we get what he's being insensitive through someone else.
Do you think any subject, no matter how serious or dark it is, if you say it in Partridge's voice, it sort of dulls it down a wee bit? Do you think?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. It's
even the grimace thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Welsh, for some reason. Welsh people get away with murder. Like, I reckon it's all Marilyn McCann's fault. I reckon it's she done it. Don't dress like that if you don't want attention. You know, see, like, if you're from Newport, I had a friend from Newport who's an actor, and he used to say outrageous stuff, but he was just, because it's that cheeky chap. He's like, I don't freaking care, mate. I don't care. I'm gonna say what I want, Birmingham or whatever. You know, but yes, that accent. So Martin, who directed that, it's a long story. I won't give you the whole story, but basically he'd been sort of trying to make that for a long time, and I think he'd had it in his head for ages that he needed to sign someone who was a big name to get money to get it made. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, yeah, that's maybe, but I said, that's one route to do it. But what have you got in your sphere right now? Because we were at the pub, and I think he, for the umpteenth time, told me he really wanted to make this film. And I was like, well, what have you got at your disposal now that we could just go and shoot, even if it's just proof of concept, that will just get that ball rolling, and then, you know, see what you can attract. And he was like, oh, yeah. And then anyway, what that seemed to mean to him at that point was just make the whole film with me. So we did that. But in the interim, he was kind of like, the character was based on his brother Mark, and he's called Mark as well, and they're Scottish. And my grandmother was Scottish, so I have sort of some claim to being Scottish. But he was like, right, me, why don't you do it Scottish? You know, that's what I always thought, I'd be Scottish. You know what I mean? Billy Connolly, hello. And he didn't say that, but you know what I mean. And I just sort of said, yeah, but I'll be coming to work every day and effectively taking the piss out of you for, like, in between action and cut. And I'm not sure how comfortable I'd feel like, hello, I'm Wicked Witches, fuck off, Wicked Witches. You know, I just thought, and it'll be too obvious. And plus, we were filming it all like locally around, using a lot of his friends and family, and I think they would have just found it too weird. So I just went, why make him Irish? And he went, that's a great idea. And it was for about 5 minutes until I realized I had to sustain this thing over, because we shot that film on odd weekends when we could, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's coming back to, I'm like, where's he from? Oh God, hello there, you know, top of the morning. All right, here we go. Sorry, it wasn't quite like that. Yeah, it was kind of Dublin accent, I guess, or kind of Dublin-y Clare. I like the Clare accent, sort of 5 out of 10 thing. So petrol. Yeah,
it's so weird. Like my long story short, my dad's been married twice because he just loves it. And the first woman he married, like, was from Birmingham. So my older sister Claire is born and raised in Birmingham. She lives in Lutterworth now in Leicestershire. And she was like, we were talking about TV shows that we liked, and she was talking about like The Office and stuff. And I was like, I just love Father Ted, and she'd never heard of it, and that blew my mind. Legitimately, just never heard of it, even though she's been to Ireland various visits, you know, seeing me when I was growing up and stuff, and never heard of it. It's so weird. Do you know what I mean?
I'm sort of jealous of people like that, though, because I kind of go like, you can discover it now. Mm-hmm. You've got the whole thing to just watch and discover, you know. But I think that transcends kind of time, doesn't it? The generations, Father Ted. I think people still would discover it now and find it. Yeah, funny.
It's still, you know, it's still influencing a lot of things. In that, one of the things that I said I had an audition for, they basically said, like Father Ted, we want our cast to be exclusively stand-up comedians, which most of Father Ted was. I mean, Dermot Morgan himself did stand-up, and Dermot Morgan, who played Ted, had no real interest in acting, but wound up just being the perfect guy to play that role. Obviously, the guy who was second to him plays Dick Byrne. So Dick Byrne and Cyril and Rogan were basically the backups, basically to Dermot and Ardle. And which is weird for someone who's so iconic, for a man that goes like, I'm not good at acting at all. And he had to be like convinced to do it, which is mental. But most of the, you know, Father Jack was obviously an actor, as was Paul McLean. But, you know, particularly anybody who showed up for an episode or two were all stand-ups. Obviously Graham Norton, stand-up background. And then I've done gigs with Michael Redmond, who played No Father Stone, you know, the really boring priest.
Oh yes, yeah, of course.
And then Joe Rooney, who plays Father Damo, you know, the Oasis or Blur, did that.
Yeah.
And then
Blur.
Lord.
yeah.
I did, and he's lovely. But Pat McDonnell, who played Owen McLove. Do you remember the the Daniel O'Donnell?
I'm Owen McLove. That's who I am.
I've no Willie.
I could have you killed. Yeah.
But they all still do stand up now, and very happily will, like, on the posters, be like, this guy was in Father Ted. So the legacy of it is still so strong that they're still very good comedians anyway. But as soon as you put Father Ted on the poster, the room is filled. You know what I mean? They do like a lot of theme nights where Joe will do stand up, and then there's like, he'll host a quiz, and then there was one, I did a gig in Lurgan, which is kind of like Bournemouth, maybe. You know what I mean? A wee small sort of vibe. And I was like my third gig in, and it was myself and Joe Rooney and Pat McDonnell. So it was Owen McLove and Father Damo, and I did stand up, and then they did a set, and then it was like a cake and jumper competition and stuff too. And it was just like the man, like, so that was like me 3 gigs in the stand up, and I was like, I used to watch these guys on TV. Do you know what I mean? And Father Ted still will always be like, it's still the best thing to come out of here, really, in terms of Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland. Really, there's nothing really that can touch it. I know Dairy Girls has got massive success, but it's a different vibe. I would say, you know, I wouldn't really compare the two. But yeah, I was just, because I wanted to say that, like, you've obviously done a Republic of Ireland accent, but has the Northern Irish accent ever been something you've had to learn for a role? Or because I sound brutal, I know I can appreciate that. Like,
have I? Yes, I do. Know what now you've said Dairy Girls. I think I got asked to audition for that, or I did a self tape for that a long time ago with a previous agent, and I think they asked me then. Did they ask me to do a Northern Irish accent? I can't remember. I have. Yeah, it's harder to sustain.
Yeah, where I'm
going into parody.
Yeah, where I'm from is like, originally was a place called Strabane, is like 20 minutes away from Derry. You know what I mean? So a lot of people, when I moved to Belfast, they're like, you from Derry? You know, and because I get a lot of slagging for the way I sound from people from Belfast, and I don't know if you're familiar with how people sound in Belfast, but they have no right to slag anybody for how they sound. Because, like, I do this in stand-up, but I genuinely think you get this, where most Belfast people sound like a deaf R2-D2. If we're like, all right, no, fuck's sake, that stupid fucking accent, but then they're saying, no, your accent's hard on the ear, and I was like, fuck you, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Your accent's hard on my ear. There's that monotone one, or that, not monotone, but sort of mono. Well, I suppose monotone, but it's that sort of like, hey, don't, hey, you know, it's that sort of just goes in the same rhythm, and that must be very hard to listen to a 3-hour presentation from in a boardroom somewhere in Derry. I've got to imagine, or in Belfast. Yeah, it's got to be pretty. I just have this impression of Belfast being all kind of grey and concretey and full of people like that who sort of don't like you. But I could be wrong. I'm sure it's lovely.
It's got a lot better. I think. Yeah, it'd be fair to say maybe 10 years ago it was pretty much that. But I think between Game of Thrones and the Titanic Museum, I think the tourism's went up so much, and then because there's more money coming in, there's like no better nightlife and stuff. But yeah, it's got a lot better. But I just find it funny that, like, they slag me for my accent, whereas only dogs can hear them sometimes. You know what I mean? It's like, you know what I mean?
Well, I take it and take that with a pinch of salt. I live near Peterborough, so who am I to like? Yeah, not very nice here.
Yeah. So, what else? There's something else I definitely want to ask you before I let you go. If it's okay, I'm pretty sure you have said this on Valverde, but you're soon to be a dad. I can cut this out if it's not. Congratulations. You know, I have a few mates in the same boat. It's not. I don't have any kids as yet. But I've just been wondering, like, have you got any bad advice from people? Because I know that I have a lot of older male cousins who've, you know, those types that are like, don't ever get fucking married and don't ever have kids. It's fun. And you're just going, well, you didn't have to get married and you didn't have to leave it in 9 months ago, so shut the fuck up. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to do this shit. And they're legitimately going, fuck, I can't even watch the football on a Saturday because take a child to fucking ventriloquist class or whatever the fuck it is. But they said to me, you know, they all have a few drinks. We were at my wedding, weirdly enough, and they were saying, like, here's a bit of advice, you know, which is obviously the worst thing to hear from an older member of family, because you're like, this is going to be racist or sexual, or
Yeah,
it's going like, don't trust the blacks, or like, here, fucking relax. But they said, see, when you have kids, right, here's what you do: think of a hobby. You don't even have to like it, but make sure it's a hobby that can get you out of the house for a few hours a night. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be something you're interested in, but think of a hobby. And I just couldn't help but think of, like, it's such a dopey bit of advice, but I have this vision of all my older cousins just in an attic in one of their houses, like just something really nice, like playing with pogs or like Furby or something like that.
Yeah. Like
Do you know what I mean?
Pony, like just combing the tail. Yeah.
Just power walking around in a state with a tin of fucking Tuborg or something.
That's who that is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I suppose my dad was kind of filled me with lots of cautionary tales because he'd been married twice, and he'd been an actor in the 60s for a bit, and
all right,
and it hadn't worked out because he chalked it all up to marriage and kid. Not me, but my sister.
Everybody else. Shit, sorry.
Yeah, and we didn't chalk it all up to that, but I think his thing was like, that stuff, it just ruined, you know. And I heard that from, and then other actors as well, like, no, I'm not getting married. I'm, you know, it's like a sort of crusade they're on and stuff. And, and for the longest time, I thought that. And you meet those people who are like going down the pub or whatever, and they're like, get away from the wife, like, and it's like, or marry someone that you like and you want to spend time with, and put the work in to get to know someone properly and ask the right questions, and then maybe you won't have to, like, you know, take up cycling at 50 because you can't you know, and like have a heart attack because you've just cycled up a hill or whatever, you know. It's like, that's where that all the gear and no idea thing comes from, you know. You've got sort of middle-aged people with the means but not with the acumen or fitness to go like road biking, you know. And so I yes, but it's sort of, I've been very fortunate in that my wife is an incredible human being, and she and I get on really, really well, and we've, you know, especially even during lockdown, you being stuck in a house together, and her being pregnant, we've just always been best friends. But people can be best, you know, you can see that relationship sometimes when people are like, oh, we're best friends, and then years later they're getting divorced because that's all they are.
Yeah, because one stabbed the other one or something.
Or that. But no, we're very fortunate that we met each other, I suppose. But thanks, Tinder. But
was it Tinder? Yeah, you met over Tinder.
It was, yeah.
Oh,
it was. Believe it or not, yeah. We're just the success story. From that. But no, I mean, I kind of, and I for the longest time I was scared of having children because I thought, oh my god, am I going to be able to afford this? And I still get pangs of that occasionally. But then I think, you know what? No, this is a great motivator as well. You know, you talk about
absolutely
types of motivation you need. I mean, I think actually it's just going to make me. It's going to make me a much more rounded person. It's probably going to make me a more confident person. And
because I feel the same. I mean, I've been with my now wife 12 years, so we met tail end of 17. Yeah, I've just turned 30 there in March. We got married last September, so we were together a stupid amount of time before we got married, which I still get stick from all her family going, you don't fucking like rush or anything, do you? But yeah, so we were married end of September, and then been both in lockdown, both working from home in our day jobs and stuff. But I think, considering what we both do, it takes us, not to be too cheesy or cliched, but it takes a certain special other half, whatever your bag is, but it takes a certain type of person to be able to put up with the fact that your work can fluctuate. And like, bear in mind, I was with Lisa 3.5 years, had never mentioned any wanting of, I'm going to start doing stand-up, you know, because I was dared to do it. I never actually wanted to be a comedian. I was dared by my mate, did an open mic, and it went okay, and I'm still fucking doing it like an idiot. So I feel fortunate enough that a couple of years into a relationship that we knew was long haul quite soonish. Do you know what I mean? You know when you know, don't you? but we both kind of knew this is going to be long haul shit. And then 3.5 years in, I go, oh, by the way, I'm going to do this thing, caught the bug. And then for like 3 years starting out, I was in Dublin and Galway and flying, like I was doing open mic spots in England for like 4 or 5 minutes, flying back to Ireland the same night and getting home at like 4 in the morning. And then I used to work at the tills in a shop at that time. So I would get home at 4 a.m. and then be in work at 5 a.m. So I was getting like, it was like 3 years. So obviously in the evenings, I was no crack at all, no conversation, dinner, shower, bed sort of thing. So it does take a special person to fucking put up with this fucking weird but brilliant lifestyle where, you know what I mean? It takes a special person.
Yeah. I mean, my wife does not do anything to do with what I do. She has a very important job, but in something completely different. You know, someone getting that you love it and not trying to force you out of it, and not trying to make you choose, and not trying to, because out of some sort of misplaced attempt to prove your devotion to them. She's not interested in that. If they're interested in you as a person, then that's part of who you are. And she's always been incredibly supportive of what I do, but not in terms of like she'll pay for things, but in terms of she will help me find a way to make things work. She's always been behind me in that. And I wouldn't, we've managed to buy a house, and we have a normal life, and I'm still able to do what I want to do. So and that's in no small part thanks to her, because she got me to see things a different way, really.
Yeah, I feel the same. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
I think because doing what we do, there's highs and then there's obviously lows, and there's days where it's very difficult when you see maybe someone else getting something that you maybe auditioned for, or someone who's not as experienced, or let's face it, not as good, maybe doing something better, you know what I mean? Things like that. So it gets very tough. Like even when I started doing these video podcasts and stuff, and then it was Lisa that said, well, because I would be part of, like, I would watch her live streams and stuff on Thursday when I can, and she was just like, why don't you see if they'd come on and either together individually and stuff. But then I was kind of like, once I agreed with Richard, and once I agreed with you, that's when I got like very sort of worried then, because she was type to go, what are you worried about? And I was like, well, I've never spoken to either of them beyond the odd social media thing, so I was like very nervous about doing it. But she was type to go, well, their channel and you know what they're about, so just kind of relax. Because I weirdly see with yourself and Richard, so nervous about it's even just clicking you into the waiting room, so nervous inexplicably. Do you know what I mean?
I don't bite hard.
Yeah.
I don't. Sorry.
Yeah.
That has been something that it's been not something you kind of factor in, because I'm someone who suffers with imposter syndrome, to the point where you could kind of set your watch by it. If I'm on any kind of project, whether it's a day or 3 months or whatever, it's usually by the midway point, I will find myself stood in a room with a bunch of actors who are above my pay grade, or so I think. And I had this on Erica, this thing I did a while ago. It's actually out now, but it's a PlayStation 4 game, but it's all live action.
I did mean to talk to you about that, but if you don't have time, it's okay.
That's okay. I got 10 minutes. So anyway, I found myself sort of stood surrounded by my friend Ian, who I've worked with on a bunch of stuff, and I still kind of I love working with him, and I think he's great, and he's a lovely guy. He was in Die Another Day. Great movie. But yeah, he's there. And then there's Terrence Maynard, who's in Coronation Street, but he's also in he was in All You Need Is Kill was what it was originally called. Live, Die, Repeat, the Tom Cruise thing. He's the guy who wakes Tom Cruise up every time he dies, basically.
Edge of Tomorrow, is that what it's called?
Edge of Tomorrow. Yes. Sorry. When we were doing it was called All You Need Is Kill. Because I did it as well, but I got cut out. He didn't, obviously. And then Holly Earl. Yeah, I know, son of a bitch. Although obviously he had a pretty important role, because he wakes Tom Cruise up. and Holly Earl, who's the star and wonderful, and she was in Humans and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh my god, look at me! I'm in the room with these people. There's a scene with the three of them and me, and we're all just, it's all where everyone's, important in this scene. I'm not just some day player. I've been here for 2 months working on this thing, and blah blah blah. I'm a second on the call sheet. I'm amazing. They've got amazing cameras set up over there. Like, this is a set. This feels like, and we're doing something kind of new and exciting. And then it's just that little kernel thing goes like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And it's like, ugh. And so I have that. I get that when I meet people who are sort of, I've met famous people, or whatever you want to call them, and in the first instance, I tend to be a bit like, it's probably the contrarian in me, but I'm just like, there's another person.
Yeah.
But then that catches up with you, yeah. Because like I say, even if it's a day, I did a film called Accident Man with Scott Adkins. He's a lovely, lovely fella that really puts you, the nicest down to earth person. He was so nice about me and my, what I was doing, and very, very great guy, real star. And I was like that. I was like, right, I'm gonna meet Scott. I'm gonna be cool. Don't worry, everything's fine. He's just a dude. He's mates with your mate. It's fine. And I did. And I was like, hey, dude, yeah, great to meet you. Thanks so much, man. And I got on with him. We did the scene together. But there was that point, and that was just for a day of shoot. It was actually a night shoot. But halfway through, I'm like, oh, God. Here it is. Here it is. That thing I was putting off, that nervousness, it's back. And you just have to kind of swallow it and keep it. I went to the Edge of Tomorrow. I was doing a scene with Brendan Gleeson and your man there, Brendan. And Tom Cruise was not in the scene, but he was watching it, and Jean Marie Baptiste, who's another really, really great actress, and I had dialogue, and Brendan Gleeson gave me one of his lines. I remember saying, like, I'm saying too much here. Give him that. He could say that line, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, that's cool.
And inside, I was this ball of just like tension, but I knew in my head, I was like, you need to have a word with yourself, mate, because how many times have you sat around complaining that you didn't get this opportunity?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm going on a rant about that. My point being is, when you meet people, hopefully they can put you at ease, and hopefully Richard and I aren't too scary to talk to.
No, this is great. I say I had about loads of stuff I wanted to get talking to you about, but I know you're a very busy person, and
I've rambled.
Oh, not at all. Sure, I think this is hour 22. Richard's is just under 2 hours. So
okay. Yeah, let's carry on.
Yeah. Well, again, it's up to you. I mean, are you okay time wise, or would you rather?
I'm going for another. I need to sort of get wrapped up around about 3, if that's all right.
What time is it now?
Well, it's about 10:02. So if you.
I'll tell you actually one thing, and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
I'll have to do the awkward thing where we'll do a fake goodbye, and then I'll stop the record, but you'll still be here, but we can talk for a wee second after that. Right. I have a friend of a friend, and they very recently had a child, and you'll appreciate this, in a world where people are given very stupid names to their kids. I don't know if you know the gender or you've names in mind, but you seem like the sort of guy that's not going to go too mad. Particularly here, the Game of Thrones was such a big thing where their Arya was a really fucking big name, but they have a Northern Irish surname, so it's like Arya McCunningham or some shit. So it was a real like anticlimax, like because like remember back in the day, it used to be like Destiny Doherty or fucking Jamelia. Right. Fucking Fitzpatrick, and you're like, that's bullshit, you know what I mean? So friend of a friend, they were at a christening, they were christening their child, and one of the other, sometimes in Catholic ceremonies there's like multiple kids being christened, and one of the male kids was called 100% true Bane, right? Bane, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So my friend of a friend went up and says, like, what's the child called? He's lovely, which he wasn't. He looked like a boiled egg with a goatee, and like Pat Mustard's kids, and Fowler Ted.
Yeah. Lots of hairy babies around here. Yeah.
People aren't going to shave their babies. So a friend of a friend was like, "Oh, he's lovely," even though he was a wee munter. Let's face it. They're like, "What have you called him?" And they're like, "Oh, we called him Bane." And a friend of a friend was like, "Oh, Bane is in." The Batman villain from The Dark Knight Rises, and they were like, "What?" And she goes, "No, Bane is in." Do you remember The Dark Knight Rises with Tom Hardy and Christian Bale's Batman? They're like, "No, we haven't seen it." Oh. Yeah, they haven't seen it, and didn't realize that even Bane was like the name of a Batman villain. It just came out of their fucking head. Do you know what I mean?
Also, like not only that, but like Bane is a word. It means like like the worst thing in your life.
Yeah, he's like, it's the bane of my existence or some shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why would you? And also to miss that cultural touch point that most people are going to have with that word is, you know, it's the film or the comic book character. It's like, he's a Nacho Libre. I mean, I don't know. The Tom Hardy version is bizarre, but he's a sort of Mexican cage fighter. Well, not a cage fighter. Like, you know, it's like, what, baby? Like, and no, we're just like the Neambian.
Yeah,
so it just sounds better.
Yeah,
it sounds better than Northern Irish accent.
Yeah, I think it sounds like someone from Northern Ireland just trying to say bean, to be honest. But
yeah,
I'm trying to figure out, like, I mean, if they were hardcore, if it was a hardcore Batman fan doing that, would they want to speak like Tom Hardy in Rises, so their baby would sound like that? So even when they're like just about to speak and then their first words and just sounding like Tom Hardy, I would die laughing if a baby spoke like Tom Hardy in The Dark Knight Rises, because that voice, he says apparently it's like a gypsy fighter is the inspiration for, even though really to me it sounds like, do you remember Scooter, the dance DJ? Do you ever remember Scooter? He used to do YouTube it after this year, but basically he was like a 90s dance hero, you know, like along with like Sash and stuff like that. But he sounds like that to me. It's just one of the rarest voices I've ever heard, I think.
He said, to me, it sounded like excuse making because he couldn't do it. Well, I mean, I suppose you can't really cast Tom Hardy as a Mexican guy, but or he certainly doesn't look Latin or Latinx or Latino or whatever. But still, I was kind of like, the idea was because he was a gypsy fighter, and we all know that Tom Hardy likes to think of himself as a bit of a geezery whatever, but he was also like, he said, oh, that's Latin, because they're sort of, the gypsies were, I guess, Romany gypsies are kind of, that's the connection he made, was like, what could be more Latin than that? Latin America. I mean, that is a 60s Batman, like, you know, like, the moon, Robin, the moon is made of cheese. What is cheese made of? Milk. And where does milk come from? Cows. The Riddler. You know, it's like, what are you talking about? You just completely connected things that aren't connected, but as long as you say it, you know, emphatically enough, then we'll all go with it. But whatever. I mean, I suppose everyone talks about it, and it wasn't bad. It was just bizarre. Yeah,
it was very unusual. But again, going forward, as long as that's not what you name your child, and we don't see a photo on your Instagram of your child wearing a muzzle for a dog or
yeah. Well, our dog, we had to put a muzzle on our dog for a while, not because he was aggressive, but because he kept eating things. So he would come back out because he's a spaniel. He loves diving into bushes and coming back out. But he came out like a few times, and there was just a shit stuck on the front of this muzzle.
Shit.
Yeah, and shit just plastered. Where he tried to stick his face in it. Anyway, but yeah, he kind of looked a bit like Bane, dog Bane.
Yeah, but you didn't call him Bane. I assume you called him like Spaniel Craig or something.
Spaniel Craig would have been a good one. No, Winston is his name. We didn't actually name him. We rehomed him. He was at 4 months old, but Winston. That's
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for giving me your time, man.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and I'll do the awkward end of the recording meeting, but thanks a million for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, not at all. You're all good. I've hit this microphone about 19 times because I'm in Egypt. So again, thanks very much, man. I'll chat to you soon.
Yeah, you take care, mate.
All the best, man. Thank you.